Good afternoon, everybody. This is Monday, December 1st, 2014, and I am Corey Stolzenbach, joined by a guest right now. He was a pitcher for the Dodgers when they won the World Series in 1981. He threw a no-hitter, two-time All-Star, Cy Young runner-up in 1980. Also, if you're looking for a holiday gift this season, why not buy his new autobiography, which was just released this year. It's titled Bring in the Right-Hander, My 22 Years in the Major Leagues. He is Jerry Royce. He's joining me right now. Hello, Jerry.
Corey, how you doing? Happy holidays to you.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving after writing away your autobiography.
I had a wonderful Thanksgiving, spent it with family, and, well, that's kind of erased and gone into the past, and now we're looking for the Christmas and New Year's.
Excellent, Jerry. Well, speaking of New Year's, next year is the 50th anniversary of the Major League Draft, and you were drafted in 1967 by the Cardinals' second round. That was your hometown team. You grew up rooting for them. You were born in St. Louis, actually. So I know that you were thrilled to be drafted by the team you were rooting for, but tell me what it was like that very first time you put on that uniform for them, knowing that, hey, this is a team that you grew up rooting for, but also this is business, you have a job to do. What was it like putting on that uniform for the first time?
Well, remember, I had to go through the minor leagues before I got to the big leagues.
Yes.
So a lot of the shine was rubbed off by the time I got there. But when I went to spring training in 1969, I was 19 years old, just a couple of years out of high school, and it was like a baseball card collection coming alive. I knew everybody that was on that field because I listened to Harry Carey, Jack Buck, Joe Garagiola tell me all about these guys. And here I was wearing the same uniform, standing on the same field as they were. What an experience that was.
I'm sure it was, definitely. You made your debut in 69, you retired in 1990, one of only 29 players in Major League history to play in 4 different decades. That's very impressive. However, Jerry, you didn't spend very long in St. Louis. I understand there's a story where Gussie Busch wasn't really a fan of the mustache that you had your entire career, and so there was rumors, I guess, being thrown around that you were to be traded because you didn't like your mustache. So would you have been willing to shave the mustache if you knew it would have kept you in St. Louis?
Well, there was no rumor. That was the fact. In fact, I talked to Bing Devine about it, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, just a few years before he passed on. But during my book tour this summer, I ran into Red Schoendienst, and Red spoke about it immediately and said, you came into spring training with that mustache. Gussie saw it and said, tell him to get rid of it. And Red approached me and said, we really don't want any mustaches around here. And I said, Red, do we have a rule that says I can't wear it? And he says, well, no, I can't make a rule on that. And I said, well, okay. Now, whether or not I would have, had it been put to me as an ultimatum, yes, you will be traded if you don't shave. I really don't know what I would have done. Here I am, I'm 65 years old. This happened in 1972. My God, that was almost a lifetime ago.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to Gussie Busch about the whole incident after you were traded? If there was an official rule, what would have happened if you shaved? Did you ever get a chance to talk to him about it?
No, I never spoke to him. I don't even believe I met him. Well, walked up and said, hi, I'm Jerry Royce, Mr. Busch, pleasure to be here. Of course, at 65, I think about that, and maybe it would have been a good thing to do, maybe not, but back in those days, one didn't approach the owner of a ball club or the owner of the business and introduce themselves. It was just a different time and place. Maybe today you can do that. I don't know.
Well, obviously, Jerry, it must not have been that big of a deal for other clubs, seeing as how you had your entire career.
Well, take a look at it. If I remember correct with the Cardinals, after Red was fired, Vern Rapp came on, and Vern had the strict policy of how to wear your uniform, how high you can have your stirrups, and also his rules about facial hair. And within a couple of short years, Vern was fired. They brought back Red, and, well, those things were relaxed a little bit. Then you get into the mid-'70s and free agency, and suddenly the focus is somewhere else, and nobody really cared about your hairstyle except maybe in Cincinnati. So that was just a time and a place, and unfortunately, I was a victim of whatever was going through Mr. Bush's mind at the time.
Well, that does happen in baseball. Even today, the rule still goes on with the Yankees about no long hair or facial hair. And I know that, like, for example, when I think it was Joe Cronin who managed Boston, or was it, sorry, not Joe Cronin, Joe McCarthy, excuse me, where he had his players wear like a suit and tie on the road when he traveled away from Fenway Park. But you get traded to Houston, and so your manager is Leo DeRocher, iconic legend, but you two butted heads a little bit, and so his autobiography himself, he wrote called Nice Guys Finish Last, and it seems that he didn't portray you in the most flattering way. So you did have some growing pains, I guess. You did lead the league in base on balls one year, and then you were traded to Pittsburgh. But how much of an effect did your relationship with Leo DeRocher have on you with your performance?
A lot of people like to talk about that. I look back on it, and, well, it was a double-edged sword. With Leo, he was truly old school at the time. In fact, when people refer to old school now, I kind of laugh because back in the day, before it was even called old school, we were considered mavericks because we went along with Marvin Miller, who eventually got a number of things done for the players, including free agency. And it was different from what a lot of the old-timers were used to, and because of that, we wore long hair, wore our uniforms a bit different. Well, it was just a different place and time compared to what players were in the 30s and the 40s and even in the early 50s. And, well, with Leo, he was a throwback to a different time and a different place, and, well, he had some different ideas about how he wanted to handle the Houston Ball Club. Looking back on it, I said it was a double-edged sword, and it was because I made 40 starts for him. That means I pitched every fourth day, 40 starts, and that's still a Houston record, and because pitching's handled different today than what it was back in the day, well, I think that's a record that's going to stand for quite a while. But I went 279 innings, didn't miss a start, didn't get hurt, and when you figure that out, that's about 7 innings a ball game. So, in whatever way we butted heads, I still went out there and I did the job. And I talked about this in the book. There were 8 games where I had leads of 2 runs or better, and I didn't win any of them. If I had won half of them, I'd have been a 20-game winner that year and still butted heads with Leo. So, how bad of a relationship can you have with somebody if someone won 16 games for you, had the possibility to win 20, and well, he talks about it the way he did in his biography.
It's to my understanding, though, you two later reconciled, so what had changed?
Well, it did. It was later on in my career once I spent 5 years in Pittsburgh and then joined the Dodgers. And to my surprise, Tom Lasorda, who was the manager with the Dodgers at the time, he and Leo had a friendship that went way back to the Brooklyn days. And I guess later in his life, Leo, who lived in Palm Springs, came into Los Angeles, and Tom and Leo had a discussion, and it led to Tom inviting me into the office to sit down with Leo for a few minutes, maybe 10, maybe 15, and the two of us hammered out some differences and righted some wrongs that, well, could have been festered there for well over 10 years. And on that particular day, and I think it was in the late 80s, we got things straightened out. And we shook hands, gave each other a hug, and that was the last time I saw him.
Yes, he passed away in 91, I believe. And you made your first All-Star team in 1975 with the Pirates. I believe you started that game, actually. So what kind of adjustments did you make exactly? Because I know you get fewer home runs in 75, you struck out more batters. What was it that got the ball rolling that, hey, Jerry Royce became an all-star?
Well, probably it was just maturity. And the fact that, well, at 25, 26 years old, then I realized that there was a place for me here. And after 5 years in the big leagues, it was time for me to take my place. And I got off to a pretty good start, won 10 games, and much to my surprise, I was named to the All-Star team. And because I had the most rest among other possibilities as starters, I got the nod, and I went 3 innings. I don't think that's something that managers would do today. Maybe they'll give the starter an inning, maybe 2 at the most, but I had 3 innings, had a chance to win the ball game. So when you look back on it, it's an exciting memory. It's something that was fun, and it gave me a chance to meet some of the guys that have been facing from 60 feet 6 inches and get to know them just a little bit personally. I was never one to visit ball players on other ball clubs.
And while you certainly did have a great moment there in 75, you were traded on April 7th of 1979 because you asked Chuck Tanner, who was the manager at the time of the Pirates, what your role would be like in the Pirates rotation, and he said that yes, you would have a role. However, you actually appeared in relief a lot during spring training and didn't get as much chances as apparently Tanner said that you would get. So what had happened? What took place that, okay, you weren't getting your opportunities as much as you would have liked to in spring training of that year?
Well, you got to back up a little bit to 1978, and I had a no-trade contract. That was something that I took in lieu of money, actual money paid out by the Pirates, figuring that if they did want to trade me, I'd cash in later because salaries were escalating at an unbelievable rate. And if they did want to trade me, I say, well, let's make this thing right, either by you or by the club that's going to take me, and we'll move on from there. The Pirates tried to trade me. I didn't accept the deal because it just wasn't right as far as I was concerned. Then I went into spring training after a promise at the end of 78 that I'd be given a chance to win a role in the starting rotation. And when it became evident to me that it wasn't going to happen, I had talked to both Tanner and General Manager Harding Peterson and said, let's work together on this. If there's another place for me to get a new beginning, if it works for you, then let's discuss it and we'll move from there. I believed a no-trade contract meant that we were partners in a possible deal. And if that was going to be the case, then let's agree on it, and then let me take it from there. And that's eventually how I got to the Dodgers.
You had bought a home in Pittsburgh, actually, and you were possibly discussed as being traded to the Cubs. However, you said they had financial problems, and so you decided to waive it off, and then you signed a contract with the Dodgers, and you were traded to L.A. for Rick Rhoden. But also 79, Jerry, that was the year the Pirates last won the World Series. They did it in style and fashion. We are family. They're down 3-1 to the Orioles, and they win Game 7 on the road. So take me back to that when you saw them win the World Series the same year you were traded, if that brought you any extra motivation as a pitcher.
No extra motivation as a pitcher or as a player. I was actually happy for the guys because, well, I knew them personally and had been friends with a lot of them. So during the course of the World Series of 79, I was hoping that they would win. And they did. So it's one of those things. They got the right combination of people together. They made some very intuitive trades. And because of that, they strengthened themselves in some positions and came back and won the 79 World Series. And it's still celebrated quite a bit in Pittsburgh. But my destiny was in Los Angeles. And when I look back on it, and it's easy to do, 20/20 hindsight, Pirates won in 79, I wasn't a part of it, but in 81, I was a significant contribution member of the ball club that helped win the World Series for the Dodgers then.
Yes, you certainly were. And let's talk about 81 for a little bit. There was, of course, the players' strike, which interrupted the season. So what did you do during that time during the strike?
Well, I was the player rep, and it was a 50-day strike, and if you go back, you remember that the owners had an insurance policy. I don't remember who the carrier was, but they had 50 days' worth of insurance, and the strike lasted just 50 days. I don't remember what the amount was they got per game missed, but it was enough to cover some expenses, and when the insurance policy ran out, they were ready to negotiate. And finally, it had to do with free agent compensation. Yes. It was pretty much the same deal that was proposed by Marvin Miller during spring training. So it was 50 days that were lost, And it was something that was ill-advised on the part of management to carry this out because of what happened over the course of years, and it left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of fans. But that was it. That's the way it worked out for us. There was a divisional series similar to what we have today, but it was unheard of back then. A divisional series, a league championship series, and a World Series. And in all three of those series, the Dodgers had their backs against the wall and came back to win.
What was it like in that locker room, in that clubhouse, that you were able to come back? Because you were down 2-0 to the Astros in that division series, and if you guys lose one more game, then you're out. And it was actually you who got the win in Game 5 with that 5-hit shutout. You were down, I think it was 2-1 in Montreal. If you guys lose again, then Montreal goes on to the World Series. And then you were down 2-0 against the Yankees in the World Series before you won 4 straight. So maybe you guys had a knack for it, but what was it in that clubhouse that you were able to put yourselves together when you had your backs against the wall? What was it in that clubhouse about that team?
Well, it was the willingness of somebody to step forth and say, I'll take control of this and I'll make the contribution. And in the book I discuss all of the different players who had a pretty good series, and at one time or another they came through at a key time that helped us get on the track to winning a ball game and ultimately a series and ultimately the World Series. It was a team effort all the way, and one thing that was important about the World Series was the fact that winning the World Series bonded everybody who played that season for the Dodgers together for the rest of their lives. I still see guys at fantasy camp, and it doesn't have to be said, we played together in 81. We were part of a world championship team. That was something that nobody could take away from us, and it's something that, 33 years later, we still have a great deal of pride in because we all wear the ring, we all were there, and we all were part of something that was the biggest moment in each of our collective baseball careers.
And you guys were off to a fantastic start in the first half of the 81 season with a strike that decided to split up into 2 halves. That's how the division series was created, because you won the West for the first half. However, you only finished in 4th place in the second half. Therefore, you had to meet Houston. You guys were only 27 and 26 down the stretch. So what was the biggest reasons behind your struggles towards the end before you got to the playoffs?
Well, there was no immediacy. We had already won the first half, and we knew we were going to be in the postseason. And I can't help but think that that had an effect on everybody. And it was just a matter of who it was that we were going to place or play against in the division series. And when it turned out to be Houston, that complacency may have cost us a little bit in the first 2 games, but I also look back on it, and Houston had a pretty good ball club. They had the momentum at the time, and they had some pretty good pitching. And falling behind 2 games, that meant that we had to come back to Dodger Stadium, win 3 in a row, which we did. And then we found ourselves in the hole against Montreal, then against the Yankees, and then went on to win the World Series. So for each of us, we all know this story. We all remember everything that happened, who contributed, and when. And it's still something that we think about today.
That was definitely a special year out in L.A. Fernando Mania, with Rick Monday's home run in Game 5, Blue Monday. Definitely a special year for sure. The year before, you threw a no-hitter against the Dodgers' arch rival, the Giants. You didn't have the most dominant no-hitter exactly. You only struck out 2 batters, but what was going right for you that game that you're able to throw a no-hitter despite only striking out 2?
Well, look at it this way. I didn't walk anybody either. So that may cancel something out. Now, when you equate strikeouts, it means a lot of times you go deep into the count. But for me, I think if I counted it correctly, I was right around 99 pitches for a complete game. It's only 9 pitches per inning. And I threw 2 out of 3 pitches for strikes. So I was cranking out strikes, and the Giants were putting the ball in play. And the way I like to think of it, there were a couple of good, above-average plays behind me, particularly late in the ball game. But most everything was a routine play. So I had to get 28 outs instead of 27 because of the error in the first inning. before I could be credited with that no-hitter back in 1980. Every no-hitter has a signature to it. And if you want to put a signature to mine, the best way I would say is just what I said, that 28 routine outs, and that was it.
And that does happen. Sometimes it does happen, and yes, it was Bill Russell, I believe, who had that throwing error in the game, which would have cost you a perfecto, but hey, that does happen. But you talked earlier about Tommy Lasorda being your manager. How much of an effect, or how well was he able to work with you, Jerry? Because he was a pitcher himself for a brief time in the 1950s. So how well did you two click when working together, considering he was a pitcher also?
Well, we butted heads quite a bit. I guess that maybe I'm thinking of butting heads. You had mentioned Leo earlier, and of course Lasorda a little bit later. He was a manager. He had a job to do, and I was one of 25 players. He had to manage all 25. My job was to take care of me and nobody else. Of course I have a different opinion, and anybody at the major league level has a different opinion about their ability. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. Of course, there's egos that get into it, but ultimately it came down to the fact that it was his decision as manager to make whatever moves he wanted to make, and he did so based on the best information he had at the time. So when he took me out of a ball game, I didn't like it, and I can't think of a starting pitcher who ever does like it. But it's the way baseball is. It's the way it's going to always be.
Yes, indeed. And Jerry, as accomplished of a career as you had, and I said earlier that five-hit shutout against Houston in 1981 was brilliant. However, you didn't always have the greatest postseason numbers in the world in other starts. So why do you think this is? Was it nerves? What was going on?
As far as Houston back in 81?
Well, I mean... sorry, go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead. You were asking about Houston in 81?
Well, I mean, I said that you pitched a gem against Houston in 81. However, in other postseason series, unfortunately, your performance wasn't as good as, say, that game, for example. So was it nerves? But what was it that you weren't able to, I guess, repeat that performances in future years and future series?
Yeah, I didn't really have a good postseason career as far as wins and losses. I think the losses were, I don't count them. I guess that's selective memory working. But I did have some pretty good starts during the course of postseason. And, of course, in 1981, there were a couple of them against Houston. I had a good start against Montreal. It was one bad pitch with runners on base, and I gave up a 3-run home run. And that marred the whole performance. So if you want to look at it like that, yeah, I guess that did happen. But I did have a struggle against the Yankees in 81, but I also won Game 5 when the chips were on the line. So, you know, there were some good times. There were some bad times. And with that, you play 22 years. There are going to be some moments that you're going to remember, and there are going to be some moments that you rather forget. And, well, I was no exception to that particular rule. So you look back on it and you say, well, that's the way it was for him. But you counter it with saying that he played in 4 decades, and he played 22 different years. He was there. And when you look at the numbers overall, and every once in a while I do this, maybe once a year, once every couple of years, I'll take a look at the total innings pitched. I take a look at games started. Take a look at games won, games lost, all of the significant numbers that most people would look at. And I realized that of the 18,000 or so players who played in Major League Baseball, maybe 8,000 or so were pitchers, that my numbers are in the top 100 of all the people who've ever played the game. So you got to figure that you did something right to stick around that long. You did something right to get your name on the board. It may not be up there with the best of them, but you're still there, and you leave your mark. And there are a lot of guys who live their lives that way, and then they pass on. But those numbers will remain there forever. That's the legacy.
And what is the key to pitching as long as you did?
Well, a lot of it has to be health. A lot of it has to be luck. And other parts of it are desire. I just wanted to play that long. And the last game I pitched in 1990, I'd already told Jim Leland on a Saturday in St. Louis that I was going to retire. Sunday, the Pirates won the division in the National League East. There were 3 games left to play. It was a Monday and Tuesday night, a Wednesday afternoon. And on Monday night, Jim asked me if I'd like to start the final game of the season, knowing that I was going to retire. And I figured, what better way, after 22 years in the major leagues, than to walk off with your head held high, because you were able to compete on a major league level for 22 different seasons. Not a whole lot of guys were able to do that. And when he came to take me out of the game in the top of the 6th, I said, thanks for giving me the chance to end my career with dignity. He says, I just want to shake the hand of the man who played as long as you did. Congratulations. And that was it. And then I got the standing ovation, the curtain call. What a perfect way to end a career.
Jim Leland's always been a great ambassador to the game of baseball. You pitched for the White Sox for a little bit in 1988 and 1989. I've interviewed many former Chicago baseball players who played for the White Sox, the Cubs. So what did pitching in Chicago mean to you?
Well, Corey, I grew up in St. Louis, and I remember that when the Cubs used to come into Busch Stadium, there would always be an extra 10, maybe 15,000 people in the stands, despite where the two teams were in the standings. So I knew that the relationship between Chicago and St. Louis was an important one as far as fans were concerned. Now, pitching in Chicago, pitching at Comiskey Park, it took me back to the days of Old Busch Stadium, which used to be called Sportsman's Park until Gussie Busch bought it back in 1953 and changed the name to Busch Stadium. And walking around Comiskey, you could almost sense the feeling of history everywhere that you walked. This was the place of the first All-Star game. It was the place of the Negro League All-Star games. It was the place where the greats of the American League played up until the early 1990s when Old Comiskey gave way to New Comiskey. So there was a lot of history on that field. There was a lot of history, and you could sense the ghost when you walk through the stands. I enjoyed coming to the ballpark early on a travel day and just sitting there in a chair and watching everything that went on and then imagining what it was like to go back 60, maybe even 80 years and imagine all of the baseball greats who played on that particular field. For someone who was 38, 39 years old at the time, and remembering what it was like growing up in St. Louis, it was a sense of history meeting the modern day.
But it sounds to me like also, Jerry, that maybe you may have been a little emotional or something when the original Comiskey was demolished?
It was time. It really was time. It would have cost too much to bring it up to date. It would have been nice, but to keep it around, much like Fenway or Wrigley, but it just wasn't meant to be. And New Comiskey right now, from what I remember, and it's been a couple of years since I've been there, is a huge improvement over Old Comiskey, from the sound system. There was some concrete that needed some work, and it would have just been, it would have been very tough to keep it in a working condition, even with the history. So you take a look at those things, and I look back on it, and I just say I was glad that I was able to play there, be a part, even a small part of White Sox history, and I'm thankful for it.
Jerry Royce, you've been an amazing guest, and thank you to you, the listeners. Don't forget, looking for a holiday gift this season, buy his new autobiography, Bringing the Right Hander, My 22 Years in the Majors. Jerry, thank you so much. You've been great. I hope you get your holiday shopping done. Have a great holiday.
Well, Corey, I appreciate you mentioning that, but one more thing needs to be mentioned with regards to my book. Sure, you could go into Barnes & Noble and buy it, and you could get it on Amazon.com and probably get it for a pretty good price. But if you want a signed copy and get it direct from me, go to my website, jerryroyce.com, and go through the process. It's right there on the front page, and I'll sign and send a copy. and usually I do it within 24 hours of receiving the order, and you'll have a tremendous gift. Yeah, it's a great gift if you go through the other ways to get it. It's a perfect gift if you get it signed for someone you really care about.
I think, Jerry, if you weren't a pitcher, you could have been a good pitchman if you weren't a pitcher. But you really take care, sir. Thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Take care. Thank you.
Corey, enjoyed the visit, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you. I'll be sending you a copy. Good luck with the book sales. Thank you.